the biggest mistakes that music creators make is thinking that every chord progression can only express one emotion. So I wonder how they cope with the fact that Pachelbel's Canon in D and Holding Out for a Hero by Bonnie Tyler, and of course made famous by the fairy godmother's performance in Shrek 2, use the same progression, at least the beginning of it. Canon in D is super elegant and posh sounding, while Holding Out for a Hero is intense and inspiring. In Shrek 2, it's used for an action scene when Shrek is trying to get into the castle with the help of a giant gingerbread man. It would also make a great soundtrack for a training montage scene, like Rocky style. Since the chord progression's the same in both, logically, it's something else in the music that makes Canon in D sound so different from Holding Out for a Hero. 1-5-6-3 is known colloquially as the Pachelbel progression because it's the first 4 chords of the progression that Pachelbel uses in Canon in D. The rest of the sequence goes 4-1-4-5, which really just helps to emphasize the dominant Teutonic motion, so progression works just fine without that ending bit. So what other musical things are happening in Canon in D? First off, note that the harmonic rhythm in Canon in D, which just refers to how fast the chords are changing, is fast. It's 1 beat per chord, so every single one of these beats in the cello is a different chord. Pachelbel goes through the entire sequence of 8 chords in just 2 measures and just keeps repeating it. While the tempo itself isn't fast, the chord changes give it a sense of fast forward motion. While the cello just repeats the roots of the chord over and over again, so sorry cellists if you're triggered by this, the other 3 or 4 parts, depending on your ensemble, play in counterpoint with one another, which just means that there are independent melodies that could stand alone as a melody. This gives it more of a classical sound because it's a hallmark of like classical music, and I say that more broadly to include like Baroque music and classical and so on. So it's really our association with this type of musical texture that makes it sound so posh. The melodies themselves of Canon in D are also important factors in the sound of the piece. All of the melodies move a lot and have wide ranges. In every measure, they're often larger than an octave, especially like look down here. We've got pretty wide ranges going on here from a low D to a high D to an A above that, so much larger than a measure. And this makes the whole piece sound more active and bouncy and joyful. So let's listen to a little bit of that. I'm actually gonna skip to one of the more active parts. I'm sorry, I'm not lined up with the sheet music. Holding Out for a Hero, in contrast, uses a minor version of the progression, which of course does contribute to a darker and more intense sound for the song, but that's definitely not the only thing that makes the song sound so different from Canon in D. The harmonic rhythm in comparison to Canon in D is quite slow. We have 2 measures per chord. Then the texture is also quite different. It uses more of a melody plus accompaniment texture, which means that there's one independent melody, and in this transcription, it's just the top line of the top of the piano part, and then the rest of the parts seek to support that. So that's what these chords are doing in the middle, and then the bass, of course. The bass is repeating octave eighth notes on the roots of all of those chords, which gives it more of a dance or like disco-like sound. So even though the harmony sticks kind of in the same position for a while, the bass creates a sense of tension for forward momentum. This type of forward momentum is different in Canon in D versus Holding Out for a Hero. So the forward motion I was talking about in Canon in D is more like a slinky that you push down an endless staircase, so it just keeps going and going. Whereas the type of motion in Holding Out for a Hero is more like, with every chord change, you're pushing a spring down and then releasing it once you go to the next chord, and then you repeat that with every single chord. So the forward momentum is more like create tension, release, create tension, release. And this tension is a big part of what creates that sense of intensity, which is why I think it'd make a great training montage song. And I'm sure people listen to it in the gym too. Finally, the other thing that really makes them sound different is the melody. Canon in D has that super bouncy sounding melody with huge ranges, whereas Holding Out for a Hero uses a lot of repeated notes, and the overall range is much smaller as well. We start out at a C here is the highest note, and then we only get down to a C in the melody as well. So the whole thing, the whole melody is just an octave in this section, and that was very different for Canon in D, where like even just in a single measure you got a whole octave, because most of the measures in this piece only have 2 notes in the melody that are right next to each other. So A to G, just A's, G, and then we get just like a little bounce down to E, but back up, A's and G's, F and G, F, E, E, D, C, and this is like the most active measure here. Additionally, the rhythms are slower. We've got a lot of quarter notes and then just eighth notes, whereas in canon in D we had a lot of like 16th notes and 32nd notes. Additionally, the melodic contour, which is just the shape of the melody, if you played like connect the dots with all of the note heads, it just lowers every measure, so it creates this sinking sensation of like falling down and going deeper into this deep place, which gives it more of an overall vibe of put your head down and get ready to fight. So if you're like a boxer, you're putting your head down, getting ready to fight. Whereas canon in D is more of a dancing on your tippy toes joyously kind of vibe, which is why it's used in weddings all the time. Let's listen to a little bit of Holding Out for a Hero.
I need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the end of the night. He's gotta be strong and he's gotta be fast and he's gotta be fresh from the fight.
From this example, you can see that while harmony does play a role in the vibe of a piece, other musical elements like the texture, melodic contour, rhythm and meter, and harmonic rhythm all play much larger roles. There are other chord progression comparisons like this in my free PDF guide, 5 popular chord progressions and how to use them. But if you want to dig even deeper into this kind of analysis and learning like what makes a vibe happen in a piece of music, definitely check out my music and emotion course. You can find both of them in my profile. Let me know if you have any questions.